Okay, welcome back to Virginia Free Interviews the Candidates. Joining me now is B.J. Brown, who is challenging for the nomination for the Republican Party in the District 31, Delegate Scott Lingenfelter. Ms. Brown, please introduce yourself and we'll answer some questions.
Great. Well, a little bit about myself. Like you said, my name is B.J. Brown, and I have a master's degree in kinesiology, health services, with an emphasis in business and public administration. And I've managed staffs as large as 75 to 100 people in many large facilities, serving thousands of patrons for the Navy overseas and for local governments. In Virginia, preparing budgets, marketing, staffing. And I've advocated for children, vets, and the elderly throughout my career. I just recently did research for the epidemic of ADHD and other misdiagnosed mental illnesses, and it was placed in the Joint Commission on Healthcare this session to be studied. I'm currently on the Virginia Commission on Use Advisory Board.
Okay. And why are you running for the House of Delegates?
Well, I think that right now we're in need of change, particularly in the school systems, the needs of vets, and in our economic growth. I also think that it's really important that delegates and senators listen to their constituents. And also, I think it's really important that we work between the party lines, which you've been well received in and been thought well of because of that. I think that's really important in today's political climate. And we also have issues that desperately need to be addressed. There were numerous legislative studies and bills concerning the ADHD epidemic and the lack of breaks, recess, and PE in legislators around the country. And the states have now become aware of the unsustainable pressure on their budgets due to ADHD. We now have 1 in 3 boys and many girls in areas of Virginia that have been labeled with ADHD, and that medication disqualifies them from military service. That's a huge hit on this country. Countless worldwide studies have proven that the youngest in the class are 75% more likely to receive a diagnosis than their older peers. We've got this issue going on within the school systems that have changed, and that was due to No Child Left Behind. This has a severe impact on our country. Due to the mental health manual that's called the DSM, we now allow normal differences in childhood temperament to be diagnosed as a mental disorder due to the weak DSM criteria. These issues have to be addressed because, according to the DSM architect himself, we now have epidemics in misdiagnosed ADHD, bipolar, and autism, and these are due to the weakened criteria. And also within our school systems, No Child Left Behind has placed children, schools, and families in a state of stress. It wasn't meant to be, but that's what ended up occurring, and it triggered a decrease or outright removal of break times, recess, and PE from school schedules, and an increase in homework, testing, and academic pressure. So the results of these schedules are now that children have longer schedules than adults. And due to No Child Left Behind, the rates of ADHD, obesity, self-harm, anxiety, depression, and other childhood disorders have had a rise, and the antipsychotic use has increased dramatically. the experts are all calling for certain solutions for this, and I think that needs to be put into place. If we can straighten out situations for youth, it will put less of a burden on the extreme budgets that are needed for mental health crisis. And that would involve awareness of these misdiagnoses and epidemics and the side effects of these drugs, and revision of our DSM, extending our current breaks, PE, and recess to meet the expert guidelines. And this would be with Every Student Should Succeed Act coming into place, and less testing. The standardized testing alone is in the millions, and the cost of it. We need to cut that back. And we need to, right now, make people aware of the caution when seeking mental health diagnosis. I also think that it's really important that we need to support small businesses and promote our economic growth. And I'm interested to hear what Congress will decide concerning the tax reform, because that's going to have an impact on what the states might have to pick up, because now it's going to be a 10, 25, 35% brackets that people will be placed into. And the question becomes, what services will be cut that the states will need to pick up? And Prince William County just approved the advertised rate of 1.125 real estate tax rate, which was necessary. But if we come down on our federal rates and go up in our local rates, then the question is, what will the state need to do in order to equal out what's necessary? And I don't want to see overburdensome taxes put into place. I'd also like to see the hot lanes become more effective. If we brought the high fees down from this area, more drivers could get into the hot lanes, taking the burden off of the general lanes. And through negotiations with Transurban or subsidizing for areas that are so far away from Northern Virginia, we could make a difference. I also think an outside contractor is the way to go for a more in-depth study of transportation. To think the committees formed by delegates and senators can make the types of decisions needed for this area is not really effective. We need specialized contractors who can give us more information to make sure that this is a much more effective area for us. And we currently have fare hikes are coming for bus riders in Prince William County also. So OmniRide commuters are going to be paying $6.90 to $9.20, and that's an increase of 5% for the Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission, and some service cuts to some of the routes and eliminating some of the routes on the systems. I think the Navy Yard. Between the commute costs and childcare costs, families are struggling. And I think some of these areas could be tweaked to help provide better family lives and a way for people to be able to handle all these increased costs.
Okay. Well, you've gotten very specific on a couple of key items there, especially the ADHD and hot lanes, very specific proposals there or interest there. Let's jump, if we can, to higher education, since I think you've informed us where you are on K-12, especially with reforms to SOLs and the DSM modeling relative to the children today and helping them out with sincere passion there. Having been an education policy person myself for a number of years, I get it. Let's jump up if we can to higher education. What are your thoughts on affordability and accessibility to Virginia's higher education system, which was recently ranked #1 in the country?
And has also had to go up in cost, which I think is going to be burdensome to many families. I think that right now we need to take a more in-depth look at the cost of these colleges and how parents are able to afford this. Many times they're not able to, particularly with what they're already having to pay for the cost of living. As far as my being able to address specifically how we're going to go about making that a more efficient system, I'm not prepared to comment until I've further studied that issue. But I do think it's important that we need to analyze that situation better. It's been one of my goals to listen to what constituents have to say.
Okay. It sounds, if I can, and please don't let me go down this rabbit hole if it's accurate. You seem to be frustrated with the level of productivity and services coming from state government, and yet you're willing to take a long review and study all these elements. Are you suggesting that that's not currently being done? You serve on Commission of Youth. You're familiar with the Joint Commission on Healthcare. You're just not satisfied with the depth of review or the recommendations? What's going on there?
Well, that's one of the other things that I found very interesting, that it's not that I'm not satisfied what our current legislators are doing. It's the way that we have set things up is that going into the General Assembly, it's a 2-month period of time of being hit with an enormous amount of issues that need to be seriously looked at. Now, I don't know of any other company or proficient body that could handle that amount of stuff all at one time. It seems that aspect needs to be looked at itself. And another thing that I have found is that taking the time, I took 3 years to sit back and research the schools. Certainly, we shouldn't be making decisions for the largest portion of our budget in 4 or 5 meetings throughout the year. More time needs to be taken, and there needs to be far more listening to. I go to the school board meetings, the Board of County Supervisor meetings, the local teacher association meetings. That can't be done if a delegate isn't actually going and listening to what they have to say. They're meeting once a year right now prior to a General Assembly session. And that's just not effective. It's also a lot to ask a delegate to be in so many different places at once. However, I think that reporting from the school systems with these points and what is so important and hearing what parents have to say would prepare a delegate or senator when they're going into the General Assembly far better. And there are so many different issues. Mm-hmm. No one would be capable of taking on all those issues at the same time and analyzing them in that period of time. It just needs to be far more efficient and adequate in having delegates and senators informed of the issues before, so that not so much needs to be done all in one short period of time. And I've heard delegates and senators discussing this very issue and the difficulty of doing so, particularly when many have their own businesses that they're trying to run and they're trying to manage and juggle all of this.
Right. Well, I think having been there myself with the crush of the legislation, perhaps starting the process a little earlier and letting committee chairmen start setting the agendas a little earlier in the context with what leadership in both parties want to do, and start tackling issues that are centermost important, if you will. Let's move on to healthcare. What are your thoughts on healthcare these days? Big issue nationally, and certainly not without its impact here in the Commonwealth.
Well, I think that's pivotal in my mentioning the DSM. Now, if Medicaid has been seriously abused and children were 60% in foster care and on Medicaid were 60% more likely to be labeled with ADHD and other mental illnesses. And they had to change some of the laws on this. And the DOJ has had to get involved in healthcare fraud in the billions. Now, if the DSM has been weakened, and people need to sit back and think about this, if it has been weakened and now normal temperaments can be seen as a mental illness, all children could be falling into the categories of mentally ill, and we would then need to pay for the medical reimbursements that have been caused through 70% of the doctors and editors on the DSM-5 had financial ties to the pharmaceutical companies. Okay, so if they're getting reimbursements for and labeling children and others with medical illnesses that are not accurate, our costs for Medicaid and our health insurance skyrockets due to this. Now that we're going to be taking on Medicaid, the state will then, or taking on more of the healthcare issues, the state will then have to pick that up. So we need to revise the DSM so that this isn't happening. We've got right now 6.4 million children labeled with ADHD and 8.4 million children across this country labeled with mental illness. That's absurd. It needs to be corrected. We need to make sure that the funding for those who actually have mental illness are receiving adequate treatment. And those who don't have it, we're not being overburdened by that cost. So as healthcare comes in, it needs to be scrutinized very carefully. We just passed bills in all individuals going into the jail system, and this also happens with the Juvenile Justice Department. That was another issue that I researched. 85% of them have been stated to have ADHD and other mental illnesses. Well, are these due to misdiagnosis, or is this due to the side effects of these medications that are so extreme? Many of these medications that we're giving, parents have never been told that they cause brain atrophy, addiction, and that they're gateway drugs to heroin, which we now have a heroin epidemic. So I think there needs to be far more scrutiny on what's going on and to analyze how we're going to deal, particularly with this DSM and taking on healthcare, because as healthcare is being looked at right now, our costs are going to dramatically increase if people are not receiving adequate diagnosis. And I think that's really important.
From what I'm hearing, I'm trying to get this nexus that you are bringing in the healthcare and the education systems together, and so you think there's a
connection.
again, correct me if I'm wrong, a connection here that could help unlock a lot of the costs and overdiagnosis and help out school systems budgets and the tax implications to the taxpayers as well. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. Our school systems, not because of their choice, but because of what happened with No Child Left Behind, we have overburdened children, and we put them in schedules where their breaks and their overall work exceeds child labor laws. So they have longer schedules than adults. Now, you put children in that situation and you have a diagnosis for a mental health illness. We are actually causing.
I would have that problem too if they made me work that much.
Yeah. They have.
I'm not trying to make light of it.
No, it's what we're doing. The rates of ADHD, like I said, obesity, self-harm, anxiety, depression, and childhood disorders rose with No Child Left Behind and the rise of antipsychotic use. Suicide was the second leading cause of death for 10 to 24-year-olds since No Child Left Behind. Now, we are comparing ourselves many times to our Asian counterparts, and their school schedules actually allow far more breaks, and they also have an enormous problem with childhood suicide. Children are jumping out of school windows in China because of and they now have to have parents sign waivers not holding schools responsible for suicide. This is the increase we have put on children and their schedules. And in doing so, our healthcare costs have risen significantly. So if we would straighten out what's going on in school systems, this could have a large impact on our healthcare costs. I mean, we have corporate fitness for adults, but children have less rights. They have 20 minutes for breaks, where 10 minutes of that is used to get to a cafeteria and back. Now, that essentially means they've got a 10-minute break in a 9 to 10-hour day many times. These kids are taking bus rides and getting into schools, then going home, having hours of homework, standardized testing, with essentially a 10-minute break once you take off the time going to and from these cafeterias. What adult would actually permit this? We have to have change.
Yeah, I hear your passion. I feel your passion on this issue, and I wish you the very best as you explore this and continue to learn more about it and educate us, frankly, about what you're finding. It's been educational to me. And if you could take a few minutes to wrap up your campaign, and when is the nomination?
I would love for people to visit my website, which gives the full report that was sent in for the study. And my website is bjbrown4va.com. They can see what my issues are. My mass meeting will be held May 13th on a Saturday from 7 to 9:30 a.m. at Hilton High School. And I think it's, yes.
Okay. That's down near Potomac Mills, right?
It's off Spriggs.
But down near the mall area.
Yeah, it's down in that area, correct.
Okay, I've driven past it when I've gotten lost around the mall trying to get up and down 95, and I go, oh, that's Hilton High School. Yeah, it's one of those things.
Yeah, and I would say my focus mainly.
But May 13th, let's get this down straight. May 13th, mass meeting.
Right.
What time?
That's a Saturday, and it's from 7 to 9:30 a.m.
Oh.
Yes, my incumbent chose that.
Okay, 7 to 9:30 a.m. mass meeting, Hilton High School.
Correct. Right. And I would love for everybody to come out and vote for me so that I can make these change. Like I said, my focus is on schools, veterans, and economic growth. And I think that it's essential that parents and mental health actually read the report on my website.
Okay.
As all the delegates and senators received it.
www.bjbrown4 and how can they contact you? What's the best email to
right
you?
there on the website. They're able to contact me, email me, everything.
Great. Wish you the very best of luck in this political season, and thank you for getting involved and being willing to step up and get involved. And that's a real important element to our American political system, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Good luck, BJ. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right.